Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at, well, three seemingly pretty different snapshots of how we're interacting with technology.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to explore the latest AI stuff models that can now operate for almost a full workday.
And then we'll shift gears completely, right, to a new digital camera that's designed to feel like using old analog film.
Exactly. And finally, we'll take a bit of a nostalgic trip back, looking at life before, cell phones were everywhere.
So we've got a few different sources for this.
We do. First up, there's a CNN business piece on Anthropic's new AI, Opus 4, and what that means for work.
Yeah.
Then a review from Petapixel. They looked at the Fujifilm X half camera, this attempt to blend digital convenience with an analog sort of feel.
Interesting contrast there.
It really is.
Yeah.
And lastly, an Upworthy article. This one pulls together thoughts from Gen Xers and Boomers about the good and bad of life before cell phones really took over.
So our mission today is to kind of weave these together, find the surprising bits, and, well, understand the bigger shifts technology is causing in our lives, work, even memory.
Yeah, trying to connect those dots. So where should we start the AI?
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this Anthropic article. It introduces their new Opus 4 model, and it sounds like, well, a pretty big jump in what AI can do.
Absolutely. The key thing seems to be its ability, along with Claude Sonnet 4, to work independently on complex projects. We're talking nearly 7 hours without constant human nudging.
Wow, 7 hours. That's different.
It marks a real shift, from AI just doing specific tasks to having broader goals, kind of like giving instructions to an employee, maybe?
Right. The article has this example, doesn't it? A marketer using Claude Opus 4 to analyze past ad performance on Facebook and Google.
Yeah, and it's not just fetching data.
No, it's supposed to identify differences and even suggest why those differences exist. It mentions thinking and reasoning deeply over a long period and using tools.
Yeah.
That feels more proactive.
Definitely more proactive. It makes you wonder, though, as AI gets more autonomous like this, are we seeing a counter reaction? Like this interest in very manual, limited tech like the film camera we'll talk about.
That's a really interesting point. Maybe as some tech becomes more of a black box, we crave things we can, physically understand and control.
It's possible. With this AI, though, Anthropic's take is that it's more about automating the mundane stuff. Scott White from Anthropic says something like 30% of a workday, rather than taking over entire roles.
Okay, that's their perspective. Automating tasks, not jobs.
But, while Anthropic sounds optimistic, the wider industry seems a bit more cautious, maybe.
Well, yeah, the article mentions huge increases in spending on generative AI. Menlo Ventures saw a 6-fold jump in enterprise spending this year compared to last.
6-fold?
Yeah. And Anthropic is expanding. McKinsey says most companies plan more AI investment. That's a lot of momentum building.
It is, and you can see why there's both excitement and, well, some nervousness. The article also mentions a World Economic Forum report.
Right, that was the one saying, 41% of employers expect to downsize because of AI.
Exactly. And people like Anish Raman from LinkedIn have voiced concerns specifically about entry-level jobs.
So you have Anthropic, Scott White, offering this counter-argument, like AI helping people grow skills outside formal training, an engineer designing a mock-up without design school, for instance. Mm-hmm. But it's clearly not settled, is it? It really highlights this tension between disruption and new possibilities.
Yeah, and the article makes a good point that governments and policymakers need to be part of this conversation. It definitely makes you think how these big shifts could ripple outwards.
Okay, so holding that thought, let's shift gears completely now to the Petapixel review of this Fujifilm X half camera.
Right. This is such a curious concept. A digital camera, but specifically designed to feel like shooting analog film.
It's not actually half-frame film, though.
No, it's digital. But it mimics some of those characteristics, like shooting vertically a lot. It's this very intentional move, bringing a kind of retro vibe into modern tech.
It sounds almost like a contradiction, Digital, trying its hardest to be analog. The review mentions the design, adorable, vintage-looking, compact.
That's so adorable, yeah.
And it has physical controls, like a manual focus ring, aperture ring, even an optical viewfinder next to the screen. Trying to give you that old-school camera feel.
Exactly. The physical design is a huge part of it. It's tapping into that desire for maybe more intention in a world of just snapping endless digital photos, almost like digital minimalism.
But the review did mention some friction points, didn't it? Like the main control being a cramped touch panel.
Yeah, that's where the digital interface kind of clashes with the analog aspiration, maybe. It can be a bit frustrating. according to the review.
And image-wise, it's JPEG only, no RAW files, 18 megapixels on a pretty small sensor, which means things are usually in focus, more like a point and shoot.
Right, leaning into that simplicity. But then they add Fujifilm's film simulations, like nostalgic neg, a cross, and these novelty filters, light leaks, expired film effects.
So they're really trying to capture the look of film, the unpredictable bits.
Precisely. It's about that aesthetic. And the autofocus is basic, not for fast action. Again, reinforcing that slower, more deliberate shooting style.
Okay, now the thumb winder. That's wild on a digital camera.
Isn't it? The review says it really adds to the immersion, that tactile feel, even if you can knock it by accident.
What's it actually do?
It's mainly for creating these 2-in-1 vertical photos, although the app can apparently do the same thing.
Ah, okay. So it's partly for the feeling of advancing film, that physical engagement.
It seems so. It's a nod to the past, but with digital redundancy. And then there's the actual film camera mode.
Right. Tell me about that.
This is where it really leans in. You pick a film stock, one of the simulations or filters, and you're stuck with it for a whole roll. Could be 36, 54, 72 shots.
Stuck with it. You can't change mid-roll.
Nope. And in this mode, you can only use the optical viewfinder. The back screen just shows basic info, like your shot count. You have to use the thumb winder to advance the film between shots.
Wow. No instant review.
No instant gratification. You have to commit and shoot the whole roll before you see anything.
That forces a totally different mindset, doesn't it? Compared to just snapping away with a phone or regular digital camera. Yeah. Much more thoughtful.
Exactly. Embracing constraints. And then the whole thing relies on the XHalf app.
The app?
Yeah, that's where you develop your digital roll. It gives you a contact sheet, organizes the images, lets you share, edit basics, make those 2-in-1s. The app is sort of essential to the whole workflow.
So the overall vibe from the review.
Fun, unique concept, but maybe a bit pricey at $850 for what's essentially a casual snapshot camera, especially when, real analog options exist, like the Pentax 17 they mentioned.
So it's really for someone who buys into the idea of shooting film digitally, wants to slow down, add that intentional friction back in.
Precisely. It's a very specific niche, I think. Which brings us, interestingly, to our last topic, life before cell phones.
Right, the Upworthy article, drawing on Reddit comments from Gen Xers and Boomers. It's a fascinating look back at when being disconnected wasn't a choice, it was just how things were.
It really is, and the memories are so vivid. On the pro side, a huge one that came up again and again was no digital record of messing up when you were young.
Oh yeah, I saw that. The freedom to be awkward or make dumb choices without it being documented online forever. People sounded genuinely relieved about that.
Totally. It speaks volumes about the permanence and maybe the lack of privacy in our current digital world. That era offered a kind of anonymity.
And another big plus people mentioned, just more face-to-face time, actually hanging out, talking in restaurants instead of everyone staring at screens.
Yeah, it highlights a massive shift in how we socialize, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Physical presence and direct conversation were the main ways to connect. It fostered a different kind of attention.
And that theme of freedom kept coming up. Being truly unreachable, having more quiet time, the spontaneity of just bumping into people instead of coordinating everything via text.
Right. Patience was key because communication wasn't instant. You couldn't just fire off a message and expect a reply straight away.
Being completely unreachable, that sounds almost like a luxury now.
It really does. But of course there were downsides. Big ones.
Okay, yeah, let's get into the cons. Waiting by the phone for hours for a call, relying on landlines, maybe family taking messages before answering machines were common. That sounded like a real pain.
Definitely underscored the hassle and inefficiency sometimes. Getting information could take ages, and you often had to be in a specific place.
And the safety and travel issues. Wow. Getting lost without GPS, car breakdowns without an easy way to call for help. That sounds genuinely stressful.
Incredibly stressful. The article had some powerful examples, someone's wife being followed and unable to easily call police, a cousin stuck in a snowstorm with no way to let anyone know.
Yeah, those really hit home. It makes you appreciate the convenience and, frankly, the safety net that even basic mobile phones provide.
Absolutely. What's a minor inconvenience for us now could have been a serious challenge, even dangerous back then.
What I found really interesting, though, was that a lot of the nostalgia wasn't necessarily for a completely phone-free world. It was more for the time before smartphones.
That's a key distinction, isn't it? People seem to appreciate the safety of basic cell phones, like for breakdowns, but miss the time before constant internet, social media pressure, being always on.
Yeah, the downsides of the smartphone era The impact on interaction, that feeling of never switching off, seemed to be the bigger issue for many.
So it really comes down to that mixed bag idea someone mentioned. Less digital noise, more quiet perhaps, but also real difficulties with things we take for granted now, like navigation or just getting in touch quickly.
And that point that all this added ease hasn't necessarily bought us more free time, that's quite sobering.
It really is. It almost feels like that Fujifilm camera with its deliberate limitations is a tiny echo of that desire, a way to reclaim some intention against the constant digital flow.
That's a great connection. Maybe there is this cycle. We push for more connection, more efficiency, and then we start craving experiences that are slower, more deliberate.
It seems plausible. So, kind of bringing these threads together, we've seen AI pushing automation boundaries, a digital camera trying hard to feel analog, and these memories of life before constant connection. It's clear technology keeps reshaping things profoundly.
Yeah, not just what we do, but how we feel, how we remember, what we value.
So, thinking about this for you, the listener, how do these trends touch your own life? Could this advanced AI free you up from tedious tasks, or does the job market impact worry you?
Does that idea of a deliberately limited digital tool like the X-Half camera appeal at all in this super connected world we live in?
And maybe what lessons can we take from those who lived before all this as we navigate today's digital world?
Which leads us to, I guess, a final thought to leave you with. As we keep developing ever smarter AI, and yet sometimes yearn for simpler times or analog feelings, how do we make sure technology actually enhances our lives?
Right, enhances without costing us too much in terms of human connection or mindful engagement, or even just the freedom to be offline for a bit.
What are we gaining with every leap? And what important, maybe subtle things might we be losing sight of in this constant evolution? Something to definitely think about.